Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 619. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And we're here to talk movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. How's it going, James?
Pretty good. How's it going with you, Kyle?
It's going pretty well.
Okay.
I started watching The Curse last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
The Nathan Fielder, Emma Stone.
Sure. How far
Betty
are you?
Safdie. I'm about halfway through. Like I'm 4 or 5 episodes in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say the first 2 episodes I watched back to back, and they completely grabbed my attention, and I was totally invested.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a little slower these last middle episodes.
Sure.
I'm still invested. I'm not like trying to bow out, but the pacing of those first 2 has not been matched so far this season.
Right. I would say the first couple set the tone, and then it rides that tone to the end.
Okay.
But it does have an interesting payoff.
Yeah, I've
So
heard
it's
that
worth sticking with it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna quit. I'm intrigued by this. I really like the kind of the whole satire of HGTV and
Mhm.
the kind of person that Emma Stone's playing. I think that's great.
Sure.
And there's some weirdness going on too.
Yeah. Or is there? I don't know.
Weird, not in like supernatural weirdness, but like
Sure.
some of the stuff with like Nathan Fielder and Emma Stone's dad that they were talking about those first couple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that kind of like, oh, okay, that's a theme in this show also.
Mm-hmm.
Not something I was expecting.
Sure. Did you hear? You didn't listen to Zach and my Patreon. Okay.
No.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Zach and I did a Patreon episode where we discussed The Curse in full, including that final episode. So if you're into the show or you're getting through it like Kyle is, when you're done with it, that's definitely worth a listen. For sure.
I'm looking for. So you guys don't discuss just the ending. You kind of discuss the entire show.
We discussed the entire show for like 15 minutes and then discussed the ending for like 45.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
As far as like how they wrapped things up. So, yeah. It's a good one.
This is my first Nathan Fielder experience.
Okay.
And is he playing himself? Like does or is he actually playing a character in this movie or in this TV show?
I don't know him personally, but
okay. But is he playing the same character he plays in his other? I know he's done multiple TV shows.
Sure. He tends to play dry people.
Okay.
And so in that way, it's similar to his character in Nathan For You. But his character in Nathan For You is far more funny.
Okay.
But just as needy as far as like other people's approval.
Yeah.
And things like that. But in Nathan For You, he's like comically confident about his ideas. Whereas in The Curse, he needs for Emma Stone's character to like him. You know what I mean? He'll pretty much do anything to win her approval type of thing. So there's less of that, but also like some weird shades of that in Nathan For You. But Nathan For You is, I think, just a fun show to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And The Curse is fun in a different way. You know the premise of Nathan For You, right?
Is that like a fake documentary show? Am I on the right track with that?
It's more like a Borat style show.
Okay.
Where he's not for real, but the other people in the show are for real.
Mm-hmm.
They think he's filming a reality show, and they kind of still are. But his whole thing is that he graduated from a business school, and so he wants to help small business owners like boost their business or get their business out of trouble or whatever. And so he'll come up with like crazy ideas to try to get them some kind of attention or something like that. And so
is he picking businesses that are probably going to fail anyway? Or is it kind of mean? Because it would seem like it'd be mean spirited. Like these are businesses that actually need help, and he's doing
Sure.
things to make fun of them. It sounds like.
Sometimes it's businesses that need help, and sometimes it's businesses that he's just approached and
Okay.
has an idea for. Like there was a coffee shop and it was having a hard time, and he was like, he deduced that this coffee shop was having a hard time because nobody knew what it was. Like nobody knows the name of the coffee shop,
Mhm.
like it's not a brand name. So they should just name themselves Starbucks, and then they don't have to do any marketing because everybody knows what a Starbucks is. And he gets away with doing that by making a parody of Starbucks out of the coffee shop. Because if it's a parody, you can use
right.
the name.
Yeah.
So he took their logo and put the words dumb before the word Starbucks. So if
Okay.
you look at it at a glance, it looks like Starbucks with like a little bit of writing in front of it. And if
Yeah.
you really look at it, it says dumb Starbucks. And then there were other things he did with that business. I forget what it was. He had an ice cream company where he made a poop flavored ice cream.
Oh.
Right. And
Yeah.
that was everybody's reaction. But the ice cream company got on the news because people were wondering what that might taste like, type of thing. But in order to do that, he really wanted it to taste like poop.
Right.
And so then he had to like go hire a scientist and like go through all this stuff just to actually make the flavor. And meanwhile, the owner is just not sure whether this is actually giving his business like a good name or a bad name.
Yeah, like it's getting them recognition, but is it the kind you want?
Right. One of my favorites, and then we'll move on, is it was like an electronics store or something like that. And he's like, what you need to do is just advertise like a free 65-inch TV. Just put that in the newspaper, like free 65-inch TV. Just come on in, come get it. It's all yours. It's free. And then when the people come in, he puts them in a room where there's an alligator between them and the 65-inch TV. And he's like, this is not false advertising. We told you to come and get it. We might not have told you about the alligator.
There it is.
But there's the TV. If you can get it, you can take it home.
That's some like Squid Game level stuff right there.
Right. And then over the seasons, like all those were like maybe first season instances, just because those are the easiest to describe, because the more seasons deep it goes, the more intricate the plots to help the business owners get. And it just gets crazier and crazier. And over the course of the show, you realize that he's not just trying to help small business people. He's just kind of a lonely guy, and he wants people to like him.
Yeah.
And so when the business owners don't like his ideas, he gets upset and awkward, even more awkward than normal. And then the whole show culminates in like this 2-hour movie that is pretty awesome.
Which I think Zach recommended to me as one of the documentaries I was supposed to watch last year.
Right. And he says you should just watch it. And I say you should watch the show because the documentary is so much better.
Yeah, that's like
if you've seen the show.
How many seasons am I committing to here?
It's like 4 seasons, maybe 12 episodes each. But like I said, easy show to watch. Watch it over the course of the next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
40 episodes will probably take me a year to get through.
I'm not saying binge it all in one day.
Yeah.
Just start watching from season 1. It's the type of show that you can watch like 1 episode a night. It'll be fine. You know, you don't have to like sit and watch them all in one shot for sure. And it's a good laugh. And then it ends up actually being good art by the end of the run.
Yeah.
Which I think is why people like it in the long run. Speaking of good art, Kyle, what are we doing this week?
We're doing a top 10, last 10.
Which is what?
You know, you always ask us to describe it. How about you describe it to the audience?
I just talked a lot, but I'll describe.
No, I'll go for it. That's right.
Okay.
I know you're still feeling a little under there.
No, that's fine.
A top 10, last 10 is a list, as we tend to do on this podcast, where we take the last 10 movies we watched and we rank them against each other and make a top 10 list where number 10 is our least favorite of those 10 we watched and number 1 is our most favorite. And we tend to normally use new watches only. Sometimes we'll throw rewatches in there depending on the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's exactly what we're going to do. Right after I let you guys know there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube, go check it out there. Also, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast, get extra after show audio. And if you're into The Curse and you want to hear Zach and I talk spoilers for an hour about it, that's sitting there right now as well. You could also leave us an Apple Podcast review, 5 stars only. We'd appreciate that. Or send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com, REEL with an S on the end. You guys have been sending us your top 10 of 2023 lists to that address. We appreciated that. I think we'll probably go over a couple the next time we do email, because there were some interesting ones in there for sure. But you can send us anything via that email all year long. heyguys@cinereelists.com. You ready to get into our list for this week? Should we say that Zach's not here, or have people figured that out already?
Yes, if you haven't figured it already, Zach is not here.
Right.
He's in Puerto Rico, I believe.
Yes.
So
he went on a weekend trip to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I think he like 3 nights.
Mm-hmm.
He and a buddy found some cheap tickets and said, "Hey, let's go to Puerto Rico."
Yeah.
And left the show in our very capable hands.
Sure. Definitely. All right, let's jump into our last 10 top 10 for this week. This is the last 10 movies we watched, ranked in order of preference.
Top 10, top 10, and top 10, last 10, last 10, and last 10, last 10, and top 10, top 10, and top 10, and top 10, last 10, last 10, and last 10, and last 10, and top 10.
You want to go first, or you want me to?
Oh, I'd love to go first.
Okay.
All right. So my number 10 is actually a movie I watched for one of my New Year's resolutions.
Oh.
One of my New Year's resolutions, or movie resolutions, I should say, is to watch all the movies that I own that I've never seen. And this movie, my number 10, I own, and I've never seen it until last week. And it is 2008's Rambo. This is the Lego sequel to the 80s Rambo series.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the Rambo movies on iTunes digitally a while, like 5 years ago, because, Rambo 2 and 3 are fun, and I'd actually never seen First Blood before. And along with it came Rambo 4. You had to get the 4-pack. So we never really planned on watching it. But then I said, I want to do this project, and I'm going to watch Rambo. And this movie is bad. It takes place in, I don't know. They're the Thailand or Philippines, Cambodia. I think they're in Thailand, I believe. And Rambo he's an expat. He's living out there. And he is hired to take some Christian missionaries like upriver to do some missions work. And, he warns them like, oh, there's a war going on. There's this, I guess it's based somewhat on a true story. There's this evil regime that is, committing genocide. Don't go up there. And the missionaries are like, oh, we're going to go anyway, because, it's these poor Christians are being persecuted. We must go save them. So the missionaries go upriver, and then they get captured, and Rambo, of course, has to come and save them. And the movie is hyper violent, is the best way to put it. And I remember watching this trailer when it came out. They had like a Red Band trailer. I was like, oh, wow, this movie looks super violent and cool. And then actually watching the movie, 15 years later, it's just a lot of carnage. It's a lot of like innocent people having limbs blown off. There's babies being tossed into burning pyres. Like, they're really trying to show how evil the bad guys are and how malicious they are. And then, when it comes time for the action, then they also get their due, where there's just heads being blown off and limbs being blown off. And Rambo spends like the entire third act behind a 50 caliber machine gun. It's like Sylvester Stallone didn't want to walk or something. I don't know what's going on with him. So like the whole time he's just behind this machine gun shooting people. And it just got to be tedious after a while, of just explicit violence. And then the messaging is really wrong in this movie, where like the whole time he's like, oh, I'm not getting involved. And then like once the pretty white lady gets captured, then he goes and gets involved. And yeah, I don't know. I just was not enjoying watching this movie whatsoever, and will not visit it again, even though I own it. Maybe I'll be lucky and iTunes will reject my digital rights to it, and I'll no longer have to own it.
Can you return a digital Not return for money, just literally tell them, I don't want this anymore. Just take it away from my
I don't want
library.
I probably could email them and say, hey, please remove my licensing rights to this movie.
Sure.
Let me keep the other 3. I don't need this one though.
Yeah, I remember at the time there was a lot of question marks about, the first couple ones were made in a different time when like you could kind of I don't know what you'd call, like you could name an enemy, right, of the United States, and then Rambo could pretty much do anything he wanted with impunity, and like people would watch that and cheer him on because go America.
Right.
But by the time 2008 rolled around, there's just a little more sensitivity to the idea that like even if you're going to set it in modern times, we don't have those same feelings even about enemies we had in the 80s.
Yes, exactly.
Especially about like soldiers, right? That like are basically just told what to do by their government.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they took extra care to make it kind of known that these were like rogues. You know what I mean? These were like the worst of the worst, not necessarily, just your average Joe.
Right. It's not like just the Soviets.
Right. Exactly. We don't dislike them because they're Soviets. We dislike them because they're Soviets and they kill babies.
Right.
It's like they had to give it that extra pepper basically to justify all the violence in that movie.
Right. And it is based on an actual genocidal army. Like, it's not completely made up, but
sure.
Right. They really had to lean into look how evil these people are. So then we could justify showing look how much we can damage and do carnage to them also.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, skip it. You can skip Rambo 2008.
I haven't seen it since it came out. And I remember it being pretty inconsequential at the time too.
Yeah.
Like kind of a big deal because it was coming back and then it came out and then it came and went and nobody cared in the end. Which is why they didn't make another one. So
yeah, no, they did. They made Rambo Last Blood.
They did?
Yeah, there's a 5th one that came out in sometime in the 2010s, like maybe a decade later.
And he's in it? Sylvester Stallone's in it?
He's in it, yeah.
Interesting. I've probably seen it, but I don't remember.
Probably forgot that you saw it.
Probably.
What's your number 10, James?
My number 10 is probably the worst movie I've seen in quite a while. I literally gave it a 1 on Letterboxd. It's from 1981 and it's titled Neighbors. Have you ever seen or heard of this?
This is not the Seth Rogen movie, I'm assuming.
Not the Seth Rogen movie. Very different from that movie for sure.
No, not familiar with this movie.
Both comedies. This one stars John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Kathy Moriarty, and Catherine Walker. And so a movie that would have John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd in it, you would assume might be funny.
Yeah, it's a fair assumption.
You'd be wrong. I think they thought this was funny, like in a black comedy kind of way. But man, I did not find this funny at all. It also kind of tried to be like disturbing funny. Like in what's that movie with Dan Aykroyd in it that Dan Aykroyd directed?
Is that I Love Trouble or Nothing But Trouble or
Nothing
something?
But Trouble.
Okay.
I like Nothing But Trouble, and that's disturbing funny, I would say. And Neighbors tries to do that here and there, and it did not work for me at all. On top of that, John Belushi in this movie is playing the straight guy. Like he's not the comedic element to it. He's kind of the guy that everything's happening to. And I'm not a huge fan of John Belushi anyway, but like seeing him not be funny on screen was like, so why are we watching this guy?
Yeah, like, you don't want to see him be the straight man.
I mean, I don't really even seek out comedies with him in it, but I really don't want to see him be the straight man. That's for sure. Just because, like, I can think of 1,000 other straight men from the time that would have been better in that role. Like, put Tom Hanks in that role, and it would have been better. Because he to me doesn't have any charm as the straight man. Like he didn't make me want to he didn't make me care about the things that were happening to him. And then Dan Aykroyd and Catherine, what did I say her name was? Kathy Moriarty.
Walker or Moriarty, yeah.
Kathy Moriarty kind of play neighbors who broke out of a mental hospital, and they're just out of their mind and basically just torturing him and his wife. But his wife, is like torturing, meaning like, making things go wrong in their household. It was really bad, really awful. It's one of those movies that I remember as a kid seeing on the video rental shelves and thinking, I can't watch this yet because it's like a rated R movie.
Right.
But someday I'm going to watch Neighbors. And then like 35 years passed. And then 46-year-old James was sitting on the couch and there was Neighbors ready to be watched. And I watched it and I thought, wasn't worth the wait.
You built it up in your mind.
I guess. I did build it up in my mind and then forgot about it for decades. It's not like I hunted it down. It was literally in front of me and I was like, oh yeah, this
movie.
This is that one that I always wanted to rent as a kid but couldn't. Neighbors. The worst movie I've seen in quite a while.
That is quite, to make, that's like your bottom 10 of your top 10s ever.
Yeah.
Last 10, top 10, bottom 10, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My number 9 is a 2023 animated movie. And there's a fair amount of kids movies on this list just because it's that time of year where, it's January, taking my kids to see movies and watching movies at home. This is Migration. This movie stars it's got, voice actors.
Mm-hmm.
Camille Nanjiani, Elizabeth Banks, Awkwafina, Carol Kane, Keegan-Michael Key. It's a kids animated movie, so there's a whole slew of celebrity voices. It's about a family of ducks. Kuma, the father, played by Camille Nanjiani, he is very happy where they are in their pond, and the rest of the family wants to migrate with the rest of the birds. So they decide to migrate together as a family. And you think this movie would be like, this would be kind of like an episodic adventure movie where as they're migrating south, they would run into different characters and different things would happen. And that's kind of how it started. Their first adventures, they run into Carol Kane, who plays a heron, who they think is going to eat them. They're actually going to try and protect them. Then they end up in New York City and they run into a pigeon played by Awkwafina. And they run afoul of a French chef who cooks duck. And then they end up on like a sanctuary for ducks. But who shows up? The French chef. So they flee him to Miami. And then who follows and like the French chef follows them. And all of a sudden this movie becomes a chase movie with this obsessive French chef hunting down these this family of ducks. And I'm just watching this movie like this is the story we chose to tell. Like it was fine the first couple episodic moments. Like, okay, yeah, this is fine. And then we just keep going back to this chef who's chasing them. Like, what a weird choice to make for a movie.
And the chef just wants to cook the ducks.
At some point he has like a vendetta against them. I think the duck sanctuary turned out to be a duck farm, and then this family ducks freed all the ducks, and he somehow recognized them from his restaurant and knew it was the same ones. So yes, so he wants to cook them or hunt them down, or I don't know.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was just I didn't have high expectations for it, but it was definitely weird choices I would not have made for a basic kids plot.
Mm-hmm. That totally makes sense. If I was like Kumail Nanjiani, why would you lend your voice to this movie? Just because it's money?
Yeah, I mean, like it's got to be some of the easier work right now to just do voice acting. Like you can just do it locally. You're not going to, either you live in LA or you're recording at home or you're going to a local studio.
Sure.
You can do it on your own time. Like I doubt they're ever in the same room with their counterparts.
I think I'd hold out though for like a Pixar movie. Because like once you're in a DreamWorks movie, Pixar's not going to mess with you.
You don't. I don't know. Like has John Goodman done a DreamWorks movie? I mean, he's on Disney and Pixar. So So you think Pixar has a certain caliber of voices they'll use, and
I
like
just-
if you're slumming it for DreamWorks or Illumination, they're not gonna pick you up.
I mean, I think you've never seen Justin Timberlake in a Pixar movie, yet he's in like every DreamWorks movie. Maybe not every, but he's been in a bunch of them.
Trolls. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's like, I can't think of anybody that voiced DreamWorks and then went on to voice Pixar. I think they generally think like, if you're in that world, you're not in our world. And
What about Bill Hader? He's done like Kyle with a Chance of Meatballs. I swear he did Emoji Movie.
Right, but has he ever done a Pixar movie?
Yeah, he was anxiety or fear in Inside Out 2.
Okay. Was that before or after the Cloudy movies?
Inside Out was definitely, I wouldn't say definitely. I'm pretty sure Inside Out's after the Cloudy movies.
Okay. Maybe he's the one guy who's gotten away with it.
Yeah, maybe. they forgot. Like, oh yeah. He was in what now?
Or maybe Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs is actually a good DreamWorks movie. And so that's why he got away with it.
I will say that Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is a good movie.
Right.
And the second one's even better just because they lean hard on the food puns.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen the second one, but I do remember the first one.
What's your opinion on food puns?
I don't really like puns to begin with.
Okay. You don't like puns.
It's not that I don't like them. I just don't seek them out, don't use them, don't generally laugh at them. I don't know.
It's just not your jam.
I mean, I don't really have strong opinions about them either way. They're just not a thing in my world. I don't know. You used one earlier, probably mistakenly, but
Oh, I love puns.
you said run afoul when you were talking about migration.
You know what? That was unintentional, but
Right, it was an
I'm
unintentional
so
pun.
clever that I think subconsciously I knew that was gonna be a good one.
Sure.
All right, so do you want to know what movie Bill Hader voiced after Inside Out?
I do want to know what movie Bill Hader voiced after Inside Out.
Sausage Party.
Yeah, I don't think that counts.
That really like an R-rated.
I think I was thinking more like kids, shovelware type movies, like the Rio 2s and the Madagascar 4s and the Ice Age 4s.
Oh, that's funny because he was in Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So okay,
I'm curious to see like a diagram of voiceover artists and how often they cross over from Pixar and DreamWorks, or if he's probably not the only one, but I wonder how many there are.
he also did Angry Birds the year after Inside Out. So I don't know if you're and he did Angry Birds 2.
I have no
Hotel
doubt that you can
Transylvania
go from
2.
Pixar to DreamWorks wanting you.
Yeah.
The question is, can you go from working with DreamWorks and then Pixar wants you?
Would you say that Escape from Planet Earth would be the movie that got him Inside Out?
I don't even know what that is.
Exactly. That's a
DreamWorks movie?
I don't know who it's not a Pixar movie. I'm not sure who made that one.
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't know. I'm looking just at Bill Hader, but Bill Hader seems to be doing everything. Sequels, Addams Family 2, and Pixar.
Right. But
So
like
I
in
don't
the
know if
case
your
of
caliber
migration,
argument holds water here.
in the case of migration.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
What's his name? The guy
Kumail
from
Nanjiani.
Kumail Nanjiani, right?
Yeah.
He was like the lead voice, right? In that movie, you would
yeah.
say?
I would
Okay.
say.
So what are the chances that Pixar's going to now have a movie where they're thinking we need Kumail Nanjiani as the lead in our Pixar movie? He was already the lead in a major DreamWorks movie. You know what I mean? Like they're just not, they'll pick somebody else.
Yeah, I really
not gonna
don't
happen.
think that people remember Kumail Nanjiani as the guy from Migration. Of all the things he's done, I don't think that's going to stick out on his resume.
I'm not saying that people, 99.9999% of which have never heard of Migration, much less even seen it, that'll matter to them, but it'll matter to the Pixar people.
I don't know. I can imagine if Pixar does a movie focus on a South Asian family, and they're going through the list of South Asian actors, and they get to Kumail Nanjiani, and I'm like, oh, the migration guy. No, I don't think that's gonna disqualify him.
I think it would.
Okay,
if I was running Pixar, it would disqualify him in my mind.
Well, we will see if Kumail Nanjiani ever does a voice in a Pixar movie.
I mean, maybe he could be like the third brother or something like that, but he's not going to be the lead.
He's going to be the lead. Okay. So now we're qualifying that he cannot be the lead in a Pixar movie.
I'm saying if I had like 5 roles and there's only 5 South Asian people to pick from, then sure, he can be in it. But
okay.
I'm not going to run the whole story around him.
I'm just
trying to lead.
I'm just trying to fill the Zach role here, since Zach's not here to like zero in on every comment and pick them apart. So
I gotcha.
Well, I can say right now, I don't see anything necessarily in his future that as a Pixar movie. So as of right now, it looks like he's not the lead of any upcoming Pixar movies.
Well, you can stop looking. He never will be.
So. Okay.
Not if I have anything to say about it. All right. My number 9 is another movie that I did not really enjoy. I thought it was pretty much a big old waste of time. And it's a new movie in theaters called The Beekeeper.
Oh, yeah. The Statham one.
Right. Starring Jason Statham and Josh Hutcherson, amongst others. Jeremy Irons in it as well. It's directed by David Ayer, who directed one movie that I enjoyed a lot. And he wrote another one that I enjoy a lot. And because of that, I feel like he could still make a good movie that I enjoy. But man, it's getting hard to hold on to that hope. That's for sure. This guy wrote Training Day.
Okay, yeah.
Which I love Training Day. And he wrote and directed End of Watch, which I thought was a pretty clever take on the kind of found footage documentary style thriller. And meanwhile, he wrote and directed Sabotage and the awful Suicide Squad movie, and now The Beekeeper. And all those movies are movies that I don't prefer, for sure. The Beekeeper is the most vapid of all of them.
Really? Okay.
Really nothing going on in this movie. Not only that, but like the plot of like internet scammers that for some reason are Hollywoodized to the point where it's like Wolf of Wall Street, but like the most annoying 2024 LED version of those kinds of like sales floor environments.
Okay, yeah.
It was just like I didn't think it was parody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if they had taken it to the level of like, oh, they're making fun of the way Hollywood sometimes does this to real life things. But I didn't feel like they were doing that. I felt like they were just trying to make it more interesting than what internet scams really are, which are like a bunch of poor people in Bangladesh, like scamming old people here in the United States. And then like the people above them making money off of it, basically. So yeah, the premise is that Jason Statham's friend, who's an older lady, gets scammed out of all of her money, and like over the phone and the internet, and then they like immediately drain all of her accounts, like immediately, which is not how it happens either. Not only that, but they figure out a charity that she is in charge of, and they drain like that one of a couple $1 million or something like that. And she, instead of calling the cops or like getting help, gets really scared and commits suicide for some reason.
Okay.
Right. Like she literally tells nobody. She just immediately goes to suicide. And I was just kind of like, all right. And they present her as like this nice, sweet old lady who only cares about other people and is like the most genuine person you'd ever want to know. Who would scam this person type of thing. And so it was just hard for me to accept that somebody that is that, the moment they get scammed, would jump to that conclusion as the solution.
Right, yeah.
Like before you've even tried to recover the money through like a legal entity or a investigative entity or anything like that, you just immediately in shame take yourself out, even though you're like in your 70s. So the conceit seemed dumb to begin with. And then on top of that, it's the dumbest, most generic action you can ever watch. Like if Rambo kind of bothered you because it's just like kind of the same thing over and over again as a guy behind a 50 caliber, like shooting people and blah, blah, blah. That's what this is too. It's just a different version of that. It's with Jason Statham he's the 50 caliber. You know what I mean? And I think John Wick, there's a risk that like John Wick would occasionally feel like this too, but they were inventive enough that the moment you started to feel that itch, it moved on. It tried something different. They managed to keep that rolling through 4 movies. This one keeps it moving for like 20 to 30 minutes. And then you're automatically just kind of like, okay, I'm over this. Can we move the plot along? Or I don't know. I was just ready to be done with it. Right about the same point that it started. So, he directed Fury too. I liked Fury.
I like that one. That was fun.
Yeah. That's David Ayer confuses me because sometimes you watch his movies and you're like, there's some artistry to this. Like this person, like given the right set of actors, the right subject matter, like could actually make something that's like artistic.
Yeah.
And then, Suicide Squad or Sabotage comes out. You're just like, wow,
no,
what happened? And that's how I felt about Beekeeper. Like, what happened? You'll watch Beekeeper and just be like, this guy made Fury?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, my number 9.
My wife and I add this to our short list of movies to watch just because we like cheesy Statham action movies, but this one sounds like maybe we should skip it. There's just nothing worth actually seeing out there.
I don't think there is, but I also don't watch every cheesy Jason Statham action movie. So maybe they're all like this, and maybe that's what people like out of them. But I didn't love it. What I really did like was the trailer. They did a good job.
Yeah.
And it was set to a 9 Inch Nails song.
Oh, it had like a hole?
Yeah.
Did they set it to? Yeah.
It was like an acapella of Head Like a Hole set to like cinematic, like action music.
Yeah, with like the jing 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 in the background and all that stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The trailer was, they should give that person an award, but nobody that actually worked on the movie should get an award.
I always wondered if there should be an Oscar for best trailer. Like every year there's some really good trailers actually come out.
I'd be shocked if there's not an industry award for trailers. I don't know if it's an Academy
true, I guess you're right.
trailer, but there's probably an industry award of some kind for trailers. But I don't know.
Good point. I don't know. All right. My number 8 is a movie that I watched last night. It was family movie night, and my son got a chance to choose this movie theme. And he chose 2008's Night at the Museum, starring Ben Stiller. Sorry, 2006. It's wild to me that this movie is almost 20 years old.
I know. That's
crazy.
I was like,
it made me feel quite old because I'm like, oh yeah, that came out like 5 years ago, right? Like, no, this is nearly 20 years ago this movie came out. For people who are not familiar with this movie, Ben Stiller plays a night watchman at the New York Natural History Museum. And every night the exhibits come alive. And he must deal with the fact that he has living exhibits like dinosaur bones and little, figurines and lions and all these things coming alive. And, as a night watchman, he must figure it all out. And I kind of knew that was the basic plot going into it. And I was hoping to get like a family movie, like Disney. It's not Disney. It actually might be Disney. I'm not sure. It was on Disney Plus. Disney used to make like family movies where they were like kid friendly, but also were, enjoyable by adults, like things like The Rocketeer and things like that. And this really was more of a kid's movie than a family movie. It was family friendly, but there wasn't a lot for me as an adult to get out of this movie. And it kind of had, I was watching this movie and I want to make a list sometime with you guys. I'm sure we'll find a movie to do it, but like top 10 movies where divorced dads try and win the respect of their sons. Like that seems to be a common movie theme. So it's got that going on. Dick Van Dyke's in this movie, and there is a whole reason why the museum's coming to life. And I think it was kind of fun to see him in it. Like I enjoyed Dick Van Dyke. But I don't know. It just was a kid's movie. There's a lot of hijinks, a lot of Ben Stiller mugging, monkeys doing silly things. I liked Robin Williams. I liked, like Owen Wilson and Steve Coogan were playing. Like all the side characters were fun. But the main story, the main action was kind of meh. It was fine.
Did you ever watch the 2 follow-up movies?
Well, I mean, I might now that I've seen the first one. If my son discovers there's Ninth Museum 2 and 3. So we'll see what happens with that.
Sure. You should show him Shanghai Noon.
Shanghai Noon?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that he might like Jumanji, the 90s version.
Sure. I mean, he might
was
like the new Jumanji, or has he already seen those?
He has not seen the new Jumanji. Those feel a little bit more PG-13, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've seen them, but they felt like the humor was a little bit for maybe for an older age group. But I think the 90s Jumanji with Robin Williams, I think he'd enjoy. And Shanghai Noon, that's Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan.
Yes.
Ooh,
yeah, it's basically a Jackie Chan movie, but like PG, maybe borderline PG-13.
Okay.
Just because of the fighting.
Probably more kid-friendly than like Rush Hour, though.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Okay.
I mean, Rush Hour, I don't know if you remember, but Rush Hour are rated R movies. They like
really? Rush Hour is rated R?
I'm pretty sure.
Is it because of Chris Tucker?
Yeah, because they like curse in it and stuff. And there's like torture in them and stuff like that.
I would assume Rush Hour were like PG-13 movies.
They may have been PG-13, but they're. My point is,
yeah, it's a hard PG-13.
Shanghai Noon and Night are more like Charlie Chaplin movies with kung fu in them.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
A little bit sillier and
very silly, but fun to watch because Jackie Chan's flipping off of things, and they're good.
Okay. Maybe I will add that to the list, and next time he wants to watch a Night at the Museum movie, I'll try and steer him in a different direction.
Sure. A movie to steer him away from. Well, you could watch this with him. It wouldn't be a big deal. I doubt he'd be interested. Though this is Next Goal Wins, coming up at my number 8. Next Goal Wins is that Taika Waititi movie where Michael Fassbender plays a soccer coach. He is like a coach, a professional football coach, right? In America soccer. And there's an American Samoa team that at one point qualified for the World Cup tournament and lost the first game and has since failed to like even qualify. And so he is hired by the American Samoa football organization to come in and help them win a game because they've never won a game in like 12 years of having this organization. And so Michael Fassbender is kind of like the guy the angry coach who has burned all his bridges in the league. And so this is kind of his last chance type of thing. It's a feel-good movie, I would say. It's supposed to be a comedy. It's not that I didn't like it. It just felt so like right down the middle. Everything felt like exactly what you'd expect it to be. Not that I need any huge twists in this type of movie, but it was just kind of like, okay, so this is happening and there's nothing special about it. And there's nothing challenging here. There's nothing even particularly charming type of thing. And Michael Fassbender, I like him as an actor for sure. I really like him in that Western that I'm
Slow West.
Slow West. He's great in. He's great in the X-Men movies. I liked him in Shame and a bunch of other intense dramas. But man, that guy just does not have the face for feel good movies.
Is it just like too angular, too many cheekbones?
Not only that, but he has his hair dyed blonde.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at a screenshot right now.
It looked weird.
Yeah.
I had a hard time getting over, this being the guy that you're supposed to be charmed by his transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw him last year in The Killer from David Fincher.
Yeah.
It was much better as like a neurotic
Hitman.
What do you call it? Hitman. Yeah,
Yeah.
neurotic hitman. Like he has the face for that, but for some reason it was very hard for me to accept him in this role for sure. So
I imagine he could have dyed his hair blonde like this for The Killer, and people have been like, "Oh man, that blonde hair and the bucket hats! Like, what a strange character he's playing."
mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, Elizabeth Moss is in this, and she kind of plays his ex, but she's barely in the movie, and she's kind of unrecognizable. And I realized I just haven't seen Elizabeth Moss in like a movie in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I really had this theory that she was gonna like dominate the 2020s. Because she had like going into 2020, she had like Invisible Man and Her Smell, and she had another she's doing.
Well, she has a
Tale.
hit show with Handmaid's Tale.
Exactly,
yeah.
like she was everywhere towards the end of last decade. And I was like, oh man, like she's gonna take over, and she's done nothing since like Invisible Man.
I wonder if she had a kid. Sometimes that can take somebody out for a few years.
It's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's going on in her personal life.
According to Wikipedia, she has no children. So I don't know. It doesn't have to be that. I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, Vulture named her Queen of Peak TV.
Just because of Handmaid's Tale, or was she in other things too? Oh, she was in Mad Men.
Mad Men. It's because she went from Mad Men to Handmaid's Tale, which were both very big shows.
Yep.
For sure.
So maybe we'll see a return of Elizabeth Moss.
Well, I'm all for it. I like her quite a bit. However, in this movie, in The Next Goal Wins, she's barely in it, which was confusing to me. I was like, why do you have Elizabeth Moss in your movie and you like barely use her? What's the point? Just get anybody at that point. My number 8.
All right. My number 7 is Gemini Man. This is a 2019 movie directed by Ang Lee, starring Will Smith and Will Smith, kind of. So yeah, if this is the movie about Will Smith playing I guess he plays like a hitman in this movie, working for some syndicate or something along those lines. And he is being tracked down by another hitman, which turns out to be a younger version of himself. And this movie, I remember, was lauded for its being revolutionary in like its digital face swapping technology. It was shot in, I think it was shot in like 120 frames per second, and then this was shown in 60, but was pretty soon forgotten for being supposedly an average action movie at best. So it was a movie that I never really was interested in seeing, but I did get a new TV last year, like a nice 65-inch TV. And one of my coworkers, one of my friends, said, hey, have you watched Gemini Man on your new TV? I'm like, oh no. He's like, it's one of the weirdest movies visually I've ever seen. Like, try it on your new TV. Let me know what you think. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll check it out. Or I think he said it was one of the most realistic movies he's ever seen on his TV. So I borrowed his 4K and I popped in Gemini Man. And admittedly, like the first 5 minutes when they're just like in a train station, it really felt like I was there in the train station, like watching people just walk around and trains are coming and going. I'm like, oh, wow, I've never seen anything quite like this before. And then, yeah, you get kind of a standard action plot. There's not a lot going on unique in this movie besides the presentation of it. And like some of the action scenes were filmed pretty well. Like there's the motorcycle chase in Berlin or something. Like I thought that looked really good in the 60 frames per second, and also this looked really, I thought was a well shot action movie. And then at the very end, there's a shootout in a hardware store, which looked really cool in HDR. But the whole time watching this movie, I was thinking, like, this is both the best movie I've ever seen and the worst movie visually I've ever seen. Because, like, sometimes it looks, the 60 frame rates would look incredible, and then something CG would happen, and it just looks like you're watching a video game cutscene. And I kept just jumping back and forth between like video game cutscene and really great visuals. And I found it a bit jarring in that sense. And the movie itself was just fine plot wise. Like there wasn't anything crazy to write home about. So kind of, you know, I'm sort of average on this movie. I think it was an interesting exercise. I like Ang Lee as a director. I like that he tries things. He definitely was trying something here. Not sure if it was completely successful.
Yeah, two things about that movie. Towards the end, there's like this long extended sequence where Will Smith is walking with the younger version of himself, and it's so bad. Like the writing's bad, the visuals of the two walking together, it's like clearly normal Will Smith and like it's a de-aged, face replaced body double type thing.
and they're talking like about Will Smith, so like what makes you you, what makes you a good person, or like don't make the mistakes I made. It was very like boilerplate dialogue. Right.
So there's that on the bad side. On the plus side, there's another shot, I think it's towards the beginning, where like a sniper is like crouching in some grass, and you can see like the veins of every blade of grass.
Right. Yeah.
It's like insanely detailed. And that was pretty crazy to me seeing that, because I saw it like on an IMAX screen and 60 frames per second in a theater in 3D, and it looked amazing.
I'm sure it did,
and it's too bad the movie sucks.
Yeah.
Because if the movie didn't suck, if it was something to write home about, then I think they would have had a 1-2 punch, but they weren't.
Yeah, imagine if it was like John Wick,
right,
in 60 frames per second. That would be like all that glass shattering would be something else.
For sure. Definitely. My number 7, and I think this is where it crosses from movies that I either didn't like or was like neutral on to movies that I actually enjoyed. I saw The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Oh, you enjoyed this?
I did. I like the Hunger Games movies.
Okay.
I think I'm a quiet fan. Like none of them are in my, maybe the first one's my top 600, but the majority of them aren't. I think they're maybe my guilty pleasure. Not that guilty because a lot of people like them, but I like the original Hunger Games movies, even the last one. And I was looking forward to revisiting the series. And then the movie came out and nobody really talked about it. I didn't really hear good things or bad things. I just heard nothing. I don't know anybody that went and saw it. Even the people that used to care don't care anymore, it feels like. And so it kind of came and went. And then I had an opportunity to watch it at home. And I was like, I'm going to watch this tonight. And so I did. And I enjoyed it. It's a prequel. Have you seen the original Hunger Games movies?
Yeah, I saw 3 of 4. I never got to like Mockingjay Part 2, whatever it was called.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think most people dropped out after Mockingjay Part 1.
It was kind of boring, and I didn't really care about what's going to happen next.
Well, that's the challenge with splitting a final film in 2.
Right.
You're probably leaving all the good stuff for the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
And so if you lose everybody before you even get that chance, Anyway, this is a prequel. It's set 64 years before the Hunger Games movies. And so you're taking the Hunger Games themselves, the event itself, and you're giving it more definition as to why it is what it is in those original Hunger Game movies. And so 10 years into the beginning of the Hunger Games is like 10 years after the Great War. And you figure out that the Hunger Games used to be a punishment for all of the districts underneath the capital city. And they weren't even televised. Like nobody really even knew what happened at them. And so over the course of this movie, you learn about mentors and how they came to be, and how it came to be kind of like a celebrity thing for you to be involved in the Hunger Games, either as a competitor or like a mentor representative from the capital city. And so there's a lot of like interesting stuff in it. Jason Schwartzman plays kind of like the TV host of like the first televised version of the Hunger Games. And he's really funny in the movie.
Okay.
Not like cracking jokes funny, just like the way he's acting and how over the top he is. And like some of just the silliness he's saying was funny. And it's very Hunger Gamesy, but also reserved, I would say, because it's before all the theatrics of the Hunger Games that come 64 years later.
Yeah, the Katniss years. Yeah.
I enjoyed it as a prequel, as long as you kind of accept that it's not going to be as big a deal as the original series. It might build to that, but for right now, it's a small story. My big issue with it is that there's kind of two stories going on here, and at about an hour and a half in, they've pretty much told the story that they've promised you, but there's still an hour left on the movie. And so they promised you this story. They've told that story. They paid it off. And then they kept going for an hour longer. And it was kind of like, you could have just stopped. And it would have been, I mean, it like crescendoed to like what felt like a third act.
Yeah.
And so they could have just stopped there. And the next movie could have been like, the next hour could have been the first half of the next movie. And it would have been just fine. So maybe a little overlong in that way. But overall, I'm in. I'm ready for another one if they make it. Because I know it didn't do like super amazingly good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on a budget of 100 million, according to Wikipedia, it's made 338 domestically.
Oh, okay, that's not bad.
So I don't even know what it's made worldwide, but
and I mean 100 seems cheap for a movie like a sequel, a franchise movie like that.
This one was way toned down because if you remember kind of like the grandeur, the dresses, the ballrooms, you know what I mean? Like there was just like this side to the first movie beyond the Hunger Games itself that was very extravagant. This movie is like, this is 10 years after a genocidal war. Like even the capital city is kind of not in ruins, but run down.
Yeah. Rebuilding.
Right. So I liked it.
I probably will not watch it, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it though. I'm glad that you found something to like out of it.
Cool.
My number 6 is another movie that I don't think you kind of like. I know you really like this movie because another one of my movie resolutions was to complete your and Zach's top 100.
Oh, okay.
So the first movie I've checked off from your top 100 is 2010's Tron Legacy. This is the Lego sequel to Tron. Tron was is a 1982 movie, I think, starring Jeff Bridges as I think he's a hacker or a game designer or something like that, who gets literally sucked into a computer mainframe and has to fight the computer through a series of deadly sporting events like motorcycle racing and disc throwing. And that's all I really remember from the original Tron. It's a movie that I watched as a kid, being a kid of the 80s, because it had like pretty advanced graphics, computer graphics for the time. And they obviously used some in-camera effects too to get the look, but it definitely had this kind of futuristic look and the idea of like, what would it look like if you were inside a computer? So I remember enjoying Tron as a child, and then I never really thought much about it after that. Never thought, ooh, what happens next in this story? And Tron Legacy decides to fill in what happens next in the story. And it was okay. It was better than Gemini Man. I'm not sure you can. I mean, this is a top 100 movie for me, so I would love to give you a chance to defend it after I give my little 2 minutes on it. But I'll give you my quick take on it. So, yeah, I think my biggest thing was I really just didn't care about this world again. It wasn't, I just had not thought about, what happens in the world of Tron and Jeff Bridges and all that stuff 30 years later. And this movie kind of jumps into all that. It, the lead who's playing like Jeff Bridges' character's son, I thought was so wooden. Like he was not a good actor whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess he was maybe fine, but he's given a lot of like just one-liners to say, like, "Oh, now we're talking," or "Let's play rough," just catchphrases. And I just thought that to be very repetitive. I guess visually it was kind of interesting, but I've already seen motorcycle racing and disc throwing in the original Tron. Obviously, this was an updated version of it, but I didn't find it like that thrilling to watch this time around. I guess the sense of danger wasn't there. Either A, because I'm an adult and I know how movies work, or because like as a kid, I felt the stakes of like, oh, you could really die in this game. Maybe because I was a kid. I'm not sure. But, I'm watching him doing disc throwing and racing motorcycles. And like, well, he's not going to die because he's the main character. And, so that was missing from it. There is speaking of face swapping, obviously this movie came out 10 years before Gemini Man, but there's a digitally de-aged Jeff Bridges in this who's like, is it Clue or something like that, which is a program that he put in the first movie. By the way, thanks for that YouTube video. I did watch that to remind me of the first one.
Sure.
I thought the digital de-aging looked pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like especially whenever the young Jeff Bridges was trying to emote, like the facial expressions were rubbery. It was not good. Regular Jeff Bridges in this movie, he was super fun. Like again, he's kind of in his, this is 10 years ago, he's sort of in his dude phase at that point. He was just kind of like, yeah, man, whatever, I'm in a computer. Like I was kind of digging him. The soundtrack is cool, like Daft Punk. I didn't know it was a Daft Punk soundtrack going into it, but there is a scene in like a bar and you see Daft Punk. I'm like, oh, I wonder if they did the soundtrack to this. But I don't know. Like it was sort of, it was fine. I didn't quite see why this movie needed to exist, why we needed a sequel to Tron besides, IP. And I did not see why this movie was special. So please, why is this a top 100 movie?
That's a good question. Why is it a top 100 movie? Probably because I love Tron.
Okay.
I love the idea that they made a second Tron movie. I love that they got the original cast back. Well, they got the people that mattered back.
Like they got Jeff Bridges and another guy.
Right. I'm forgetting his Bruce Boxleitner. Is that his name?
He's like the man on the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
So I liked that. And I also liked that they kind of continued the idea of like a digital consciousness. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, to be honest. So I don't really remember the particulars of how that comes out towards the end. There
is like evolution within this world, but it's sort of a B plot. Like you have the Olivia Wilde character. And I kind of wish I thought that was the more interesting part of like, how does evolution happen in a digital world? But they kind of push that to the side.
Sure. In place of like the father son type stuff, right?
Right. Father, son, and then the young Jeff Bridges antagonist. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just I really enjoyed all that stuff. And then on top of that, the soundtrack. Plus, like the visuals, they're like Matrix inspired, I would say.
And, maybe they looked cool 10 or 15 years ago now at this point. But 15 years ago was like the peak of blue and gold. Like everything was color graded to be blue and gold. And this movie leaned hard into that. So I think it just kind of made this movie look a little dated.
Sure. I went to Disney, not this past week, but the week before. And they have the new Tron ride at Magic Kingdom.
Okay.
It was great. And it was insanely busy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, it was insanely busy. Have you ever been on Space Mountain?
I have. Yeah, I mean, long time ago when I was like 8 years old or something.
Sure. but you know what it is, like an
Yeah, I know
indoor
what it
roller
is, yeah.
coaster with the lights off. It's basically that. There's like a small section at the beginning that's outdoors, but the bulk of the roller coaster is inside. The difference is you're like strapped in as if you're in one of those Tron cycles. So you're like you're like straddling something with handlebars in front of you, like leaning forward.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was one of the smoothest roller coasters I've ever been on.
Really?
Well, I mean, you saw it recently. Those bikes, they kind of do this. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of like sharp turning.
Yeah, they're kind
occasionally
of going, like,
there
changing
is
planes. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there's the roller coaster, I think, mirrors that type of stuff. And then on the inside of this building that you're in, while you're on the roller coaster, they're playing light cycles racing against you. Like they're projecting that on the walls of the building.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So as your vehicle in physical space is moving up and down, you're kind of being mirrored by the guy that's riding next to you in projection on the screen.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really, really well done for sure.
Well, I wish I had been on the ride instead of watching the movie.
What surprises me is that like most people don't like the original Tron, I think has a place in history probably just because it's one of the early, more because it's one of the early computer assisted animated movies. And because there's like a lot of 80s computer terminology in it. And so nerds like it.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, I think, will be forgotten long term.
Yes. I think I mentioned that in my Letterboxd review.
Mm-hmm.
Is like Tron was groundbreaking in computer animation. Like, what has Tron Legacy given us besides more of the same with much better technology?
And a better soundtrack.
Yeah, I don't know. Is a Tron soundtrack cheesy?
The original Tron soundtrack, I think, was unremarkable. I don't think people even noted it.
Wasn't it Wendy Carlos who did it?
From Miami Sound Machine? Or no?
I mean,
what is she from?
I mean, she did Switched on Bach. She did like the Shining soundtrack.
I don't know. I just know that it's not Daft Punk. It's not a pop.
True.
It's not a pop artist. You know what I mean? It's not that high profile type of thing.
Yeah, here we go. Tron soundtrack by Wendy Carlos and Journey.
So maybe at the time, the fact that Journey was involved, like elevated it from more than just a movie soundtrack. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
but Wendy Carlos is a famous musician for using the Moog synthesizer. And she like she just Switched on Bach, where she played a bunch of Bach etudes on the Moog synthesizer, and that was blasphemy in the classical world at the time.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, it seems quaint now, but at the time it was like, whoa, I can't believe you're playing Bach on a modern instrument. And she's also an early transgendered artist too, and like when that was just not a commonplace at all in her era.
Interesting. Cool. I don't know if that defended it at all, but I really like that movie. I probably need to rewatch it and reevaluate its position, and make sure it still holds where it's at. But at one point, I was clearly high on it. I still feel that, but I don't remember it enough to like go to bat for it.
I mean, it's also a top 100. It is subjective. So if you like it and want to put it there,
sure.
I've watched worse movies off of your and Zach's top 100. So.
Oh, you'll watch worse off mine.
Oh, I'm sure. I started on a pretty. I'm like, well, this one can't be good or bad. Like,
sure.
I started pretty middle on yours, and it's just gonna go from there.
All right. What are we on? Number 6?
You're number 6, yes.
My number 6 is from 2023, recent movie titled Eileen. I think is this a Netflix movie? Or maybe it was just on Netflix. I don't remember.
This movie. Yeah.
This was pretty good. This psychological thriller starring Thomasin McKenzie, Shea Wiggum, and Anne Hathaway, amongst others. And it's about this girl, played by Thomasin McKenzie, who works at a prison. This is a period movie set in the 50s, 60s, 1960s, Massachusetts, evidently. I'm seeing on Wikipedia. And this is a prison for like young men, I would say, teenage and like early 20s. And she has confidence issues, I would say.
Okay.
And she's pretty awkward. And her mother passed away, I believe, and her dad, who's played by Shea Wiggum, is abusive to her, like verbally and emotionally abusive to her. So she has these confidence issues, and Anne Hathaway gets hired as like the facility psychologist. Anne Hathaway, meanwhile, is this older woman who is very confident in herself and kind of dominates any room she walks into. Both because all the men are attracted to her and also just because she like exudes confidence, essentially. Yeah. And so the Thomasin McKenzie's character, the titular Eileen, kind of latches onto her and they become fast friends. And that's all I really want to say about the movie.
Okay.
Because like things happen that you don't really expect. It's a psychological thriller, so you don't really expect them to go that way, and they kind of do. And I was caught off guard by where this movie ended up by the credits, and I thought it was very well done. It was also fun to watch Anne Hathaway really just kind of like ham up scenes.
Yeah.
Like I tend to see her as like a pretty, I don't know, specific actress. Like she always gets the job done in the way that you'd expect her to. It's very consistent to me. I'm not saying she acts in the same way in every movie, because she definitely plays different characters, but none of them are like real big personalities, at least of the movies that I've seen. And so it was fun to see her kind of be the minx, the Jessica Rabbit of the movie. You know what I mean? She's the one that like people want to revolve around. And it was fun to kind of watch her chew scenery in that role. Have you seen Macbeth, the movie that came out a couple years ago, the movie that broke out? Awful. I'm not going to remember the name of the actress. She was just in that other movie. My memory is the COVID brain is taking over right now. What's the name of the actress in Oppenheimer?
Emily Blunt?
Nope, the other one.
Florence Pugh.
Florence Pugh. The movie that broke out Florence Pugh is a movie called Macbeth.
Only two women in Oppenheimer, so
right.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh, she was in Macbeth.
Okay.
That's the movie that broke. Okay, so have you seen that?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, you should see that. That's a really good movie. But the same guy that directed Macbeth directed Eileen. That's what I was trying to
I gotcha. Okay.
Which only really benefits you if you've seen Macbeth. But there's a very specific tone to Macbeth, and it carries through in Eileen, and I enjoyed that tone. And yeah, check it out if you enjoy psychological thrillers.
Well, I have just added Lady Macbeth to my watch list.
Okay. Oh, but that's right. Lady Macbeth.
I'm intrigued by Eileen, though.
Cool.
What was the Macbeth movie we watched last year, directed by, I think, just one of the Coens, starring Denzel Washington?
Yeah, the one that was like black and white in 4:3. And
what was that? It was something Macbeth. The tragedy Macbeth? Was that what it was called?
Sure.
Okay, great.
I don't know exactly.
Sometimes I try to remember things to see if I can remember them for the sake of it, just to test myself. So, my number 5 is the third of my 4 children's animated movies on my list.
Okay, but
you had an 8-year-old son one time. I'm sure you also had this period.
Oh yeah,
where you're just like binging these movies.
Oh, so. there's a time period from like maybe 2000 to like 2012.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen every animated film.
Yeah, probably. Yep.
From that time period, good, bad, or otherwise.
Oh yeah, like, and we'd like sit in the theater. He's like, I want to see that one. I want to see that one. I'm like, all right, I'm going to see Despicable Me 4. I'm going to see this. I'm going to see. So, Yep. But this one I enjoyed, and I would say this is my line between movies that either I did not like or was fine on, and movies that I found something to enjoy. So this is another kids animated movie. This is 2018's Teen Titans Go! Exclamation points to the movies. Are you familiar with the Teen Titans Go?
I mean, I know what it is, and I've seen some of the TV show.
Okay, yep.
But I not because I watched it, because my son watched it.
Yeah,
It's
so
been around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Teen Titans Go has been around for a while, and then this movie is, 6 years old at this point, I guess. Yeah, so, for people who aren't familiar, the Teen Titans, which I guess the Teen Titans Go is different than the Teen Titans. Apparently, I confused my son about that because I told him that there was a Teen Titans movie, and he's like, I don't want to watch that. And I said, and I showed it to him. He goes, "Oh, that's a Teen Titans Go movie." I'm like, "There's a difference." So, who knew? But apparently, there is. Anyway, the Teen Titans Go is a group of like, I don't want to call them sidekicks, but they're like, tween superheroes. So there's Robin, there's Beast Boy, there's Cyborg, there's Raven, there's another one, Starfire, I think. And I kind of watch the shows in the background. They're always usually up to some sort of superhero antics, being like the B team. Anyway, in this movie, the Teen Titans are realizing that all of their superhero counterparts are getting movies. Like there's a Batman movie, there's a Superman movie. Everyone's getting a movie, and they want a movie. So they come up with a series of schemes to try and get attention to get their own movie. And it's sort of this movie's kind of a clever commentary on superhero culture, because they're sort of saying like, what do we need to do to become a superhero movie? Oh, we need a bad guy. And they get up and they end up getting it's who was Deadpool based on? It's like Dreadslot or something like that. So Deadpool was based on a 1980s DC Comics character.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't, like it's a guy who has like the mask and two swords and guns and everything.
Deadshot?
Not Deadshot. It's who's it? Okay, I gotta Google this.
Okay,
it's killing me right now. What's his name? Why is my Google so slow right now?
Deadshot?
Oh, not Deadshot. No, Deathstroke. Deathstroke. I want to say it's Deathstroke, whose name is like Slade Wilson, and that's why Deadpool's called Wade Wilson. So like Deadpool's kind of a parody of Deathstroke, who then overshadowed Deathstroke. So like Deathstroke shows up to be their bad guy, and they just keep teasing him that he's Deadpool the whole time. He's like, I'm not Deadpool, I'm Deathstroke, and things like that. So it's just, this movie is just kind of sort of a clever look at superhero movies, sort of a satire I was not expecting at all. At one point, the teens think like, oh, if there's no superheroes, then we'll become the, like the main ones. We'll get our own movie. So they time travel and they like prevent all the origins of the major superheroes from happening. So like they save Superman's world, and they keep Bruce Wayne and his family from going down the alleyway. And then they quickly realize when they get back to their modern time that like the world's terrible. They need superheroes. So then they go back to like fix all of it. And when they get to like Bruce Wayne, they just like slap pearls on the mom and then shove the whole family into the alleyway. And then you hear a bunch of like gunfire in the backgrounds. And like it's such a dark joke for a kids movie. But I thought it was so clever. So it just has tons of moments like that, right? It really is a joke a minute kind of movie. And it's just having fun with the idea of like what makes a superhero movie. So I was not expecting to get much out of it, but it was more fun than I was hoping for, or expecting, I should say.
Nice.
I'm not saying you have to watch it, but
sure.
If you want a
You're
light
into that
watch,
kind of thing.
Yeah. If you want, like, you're sick of superhero movies, want to see something making fun of the whole thing, this could be a good one to watch.
Sure. Cool. My number 5 was also a superhero movie. But mine was a live action one. I caught up with The Marvels, the new MCU movie.
Oh yeah.
And I enjoyed this. Like it's certainly not the best MCU movie or the best comic book movie, but it was way better than what, I had heard. Although I
Right.
think this was similar to one of the other ones we talked about. Oh, similar to Hunger Games, where it's like, I don't know as if I even heard Marvels was bad. I just don't know anybody that went and saw it.
You didn't hear anything about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I didn't hear anything about it. And so I wasn't very motivated either. And so I didn't go. I watched this at home when it came out on premium VOD. And I enjoyed myself watching it, which isn't always guaranteed when it comes to MCU movies. Like I wouldn't say that I enjoyed the experience of watching The Eternals. I thought that was like practically watching paint dry for some
Right,
reason.
yeah.
Whereas The Marvels was fun and vibrant and fast paced and like an hour and 40 minutes long, which is practically a short film compared to how long most of these movies have gotten.
That's like
to
an
be
hour
at this
shorter
point.
than most Marvel movies.
Right. And so it didn't leave much room for like fat. It was all just kind of like, it is an hour and 5 minutes. So yeah, an hour and 40 basically. That's with credits, an hour and 5 with credits.
105.
105. What does that make? An hour 45?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because 90 is an hour 30, so hour 45.
Right. So it was more like an hour 35 by the time he chopped off the credits. Anyway, I thought the plot was like kind of, I mean, they've kind of been building. If you watch all the Marvel shows on Disney Plus,
Mhm.
the plot has kind of, especially Secret Invasion, has been building to like this Kree war type stuff, which if you're not following that stuff, then I don't know what there is here for you.
Yeah, I'm not following
plot-wise.
at all.
Right. There's these two sides to the plot going on where you've got this Kree war, and then you've got Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and I forget what the name of the third one is. They kind of team up because their powers,
Spectrum, right?
yeah, right, because their powers become intertwined, and so it's just a fun space adventure, I would say, that I think is supposed to have some kind of bigger universe defining element to it.
Okay.
But that would only be the case if anybody cared about the Kree War. And since nobody cares about that, I think it's kind of inconsequential in the bigger picture. But if you just want to watch a fun comic book movie, especially one with like a female-led team,
Mhm.
this is the best that's out there. And I enjoyed it. If you didn't like the original Captain Marvel movie, maybe because you thought Brie Larson was like a little, I don't know, overly serious.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I kind of looked at the first Captain Marvel movie as kind of like a lesser Captain America First Avenger
Okay. Yeah.
type movie. Like it was trying to follow that formula and it didn't work for me. In this one, she's having fun with it, it felt like. And everybody else in the movie was having fun with it. Especially like Iman Vellani, who plays Miss Marvel. I liked the Miss Marvel Disney Plus show, even though it's like made for teenage girls, clearly. But I still enjoyed watching it, thought it was fun. And there's a lot of that, the style of that TV show crammed into here. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Also, like if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a 65% approval rating, which is still fresh,
Yeah.
and an 80 something audience rating, which for a comic book movie starring Brie Larson
Yes,
is
yeah.
insanely high. Because I guarantee you, like it immediately lost 10% just because Brie Larson in a Marvel movie.
Oh, I'm looking at the IMDb rating right now for the Marvels,
Mhm.
and it's a adjusted 5.6. They try to account for the 1-star ratings. Almost 20% of the ratings are 1% or 1 star. So like that's where all your Brie Larson hate ended up. If you just remove all those 1-star ratings, the vast majority of ratings are 6s and 7s.
Which is like, probably a realistic rating for this.
Yeah. I mean, that's like 30% of people who saw this movie were like, yeah, this is a fun, fine movie.
Right. I think that's where it landed for me. And so if you have been like on the fence about the Marvels and you've gotten a feeling that it's bad and that's why people aren't seeing it, I don't think that's true. I think people aren't seeing it probably because they're bored of these movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or there wasn't enough building to it to like keep your interest. But I think there's more to it than that. And if you're still willing to give these things a shot, I think this one might be a fun weekend night watch.
And it sounds like it's easy to drop into. Like I have not seen any of the recent Marvel anything, so I can still just watch this movie and have a good time with it.
There won't be anything. The things that you won't understand will not ruin the movie for you.
Okay. Yep.
You know what I mean? You'll be like, I don't know why these Kree people are referencing this thing, but it really won't matter. It hasn't mattered this long. It won't matter while you watch it.
I saw the Avengers without seeing like a Thor movie back in 2012. So I figured out pretty quickly what the Tesseract was. I feel like you don't need all that information.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. You got it.
All right. Well, maybe I'll check that one out. We'll see. All right. My number 4 is the last of my children's animated movies.
Okay.
It is also the first movie from 2024 that I've watched. So it is currently my favorite 2024 movie. This is a Netflix movie called Orion and the Dark. This is a story about a kid named Orion, voiced by Zach's favorite Twitter follower, Jacob Trendley, he's a scaredy cat. He's scared of everything. He's scared of clowns. He's scared of, noises. He's scared of girls. He's like a middle school age kid. But the biggest thing he's scared of is the dark. And one night, the dark in this personified form gets sick of being the bad guy and says, hey kid, like you're so scared of me. How about you spend a night with me and all my other nighttime buddies, like dreams and, noises and all these things. And you'll see that we're not so bad. So it's a kid who kind of like, learns to face his fears and go on a journey. What makes this movie interesting is that it's written by Charlie Kaufman. Yes. And I mean, I'll say it never goes full Charlie Kaufman. Like there definitely were some guardrails that were put on him. So you're not going to get like a Being John Malkovich kids movie or anything like that. But there's definitely some oddness to this movie. There's, some liberties they take in who's telling the story. And there is a moment of like existentialism that they kind of explore towards the end of like this, where they create a world that's sort of different than the one we live in already, or a world of different consequences. And it's kind of towing the line of like existential dread in a kid's movie, which you don't see very often. It doesn't go full bore. Obviously, someone pulled in the reins and said, hey, Charlie, we can't go that far. Like this is still like a Netflix kids movie, but it's fun to watch a movie that's about a kid being scared, that has some scary images to it. I feel like so many kids movies, as I've already talked about on this list, are so sanitized or just like weird for odd choices. And this one's weird because you have a interesting person who's like behind the script of this thing. So I'm not saying this is some groundbreaking kids movie. It's not even like my favorite kids movie, but it's definitely more interesting than a lot of the other stuff I've been watching, as you can see on this list.
Yeah. I just heard about this like maybe a day or so ago. And I was like, that's weird. Charlie Kaufman did a DreamWorks movie. That's
right.
wild.
Exactly.
But I hadn't seen it yet. I'm glad to hear you got something out of it, because I know Charlie Kaufman can be hit or miss for you.
So my take on Charlie Kaufman is I love him as a writer. I do not care for him as a director. I think
So
when
the
he's a
movies that he wrote and directed you don't like, and the movies that he just wrote and somebody else directed you seem to like.
Yes, I think I don't know him personally. I haven't studied him in depth, but he seems to be like the kind of person where when he gets his own material, he just kind of goes he's like dives into it head first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he gets very much in love with his material. And I think there's something to be said about someone else taking his material and, sort of being able to do their own interpretation of it. And I don't know how Charlie Kaufman feels about the movies he hasn't directed.
Mm-hmm.
He might be like, oh, that wasn't my vision. I did not care for that. But I personally think that he is better interpreted by other people than by himself.
And you've seen Synecdoche, New York.
I've seen Synecdoche, I've seen Anomalisa, and I'm thinking of Ending Things.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say of the three, Synecdoche is the one I liked the most.
Mm-hmm.
But even that one got to be like, I know the movie kind of folds in on itself anyway. That's the point of it. But that seemed to be somewhat self-serving, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to use a crude term to describe him as a director.
Okay.
I'm dancing around it.
I don't know what the word would be. Self-indulgent?
Yeah, self-indulgence, a better way of using this than the crude term I'm thinking of.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Interesting. I want to know what this term is.
I mean, I'll say it if you promise to bleep it.
Sure.
But you have to promise to bleep it, though.
I'll bleep it.
Okay. All right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. He enjoys himself.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
All right. Fair enough.
Self-indulgent is a much better word than what I was thinking of. So
sure.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm going to check it out just because I need to have seen everything he's ever created.
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. My number 4 is another movie from 2023 that I enjoyed. Wouldn't have made my top 20 list at the end of the year, but I finally got to Ferrari.
Oh, Michael Mann.
Michael Mann, director of Thief and Heat and a bunch of other movies that you've probably seen. This time he's doing kind of it's a biopic in that it tells a piece of the biography of what was his name? Michael Ferrari? Something like that.
I thought it was Enzo.
Enzo
Okay.
Ferrari.
I think it's a little bit more Italian than Michael.
Sure. Enzo Ferrari. And then but it's telling like a pretty small slice of his biography, I would say. I guess technically it's a biopic, but it's not exactly giving you the history of Enzo Ferrari. Mm-hmm. In this world, Enzo has a wife and his son has already died at the age of 8. He has another son from a mistress that he has that his wife doesn't know about. And him and his wife have gone through a couple years of grieving their son who has died. And it's kind of put him in a weird position in his personal life where it's like his legit wife, his legit, quote unquote, legit son has died of an illness. And it wasn't really that big a deal for him to have a woman on the side who also had a similar age son until like the legit son died. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's like, if his wife ever finds out he has this other woman and this other family on the side, like he has a whole son over here that's not hers, basically. And so he's definitely like kind of a rich Italian playboy, I would say, who, has gotten himself in this awkward position. So that's what's going on in his personal life. Meanwhile, he's trying to put together this race team for this specific, long distance road race. And you have evidently like 4 vehicles in your team, and it's like a 24-hour type of race. Mm-hmm. And he's preparing the team and like recruiting people and testing vehicles. And he's like on the verge of financial ruin if they don't win this race, basically. He's selling like 100 vehicles a year. Mm. And to him, that's a lot. But to the people who manage his money, they're like, you have to sell more. You know what I mean? Like, or you're just going to go out of business. Your R&D is way higher than the amount of money you're bringing in actually selling the vehicles. And he's just kind of like, well, if we win, the sales will come, type of thing. And they're like, well, you haven't been winning, so you might want to start doing that.
Yeah. And is he like a perfectionist who has this design that he doesn't want to compromise? He's like, this is the car.
There's a little bit of that, but not a
Okay.
whole lot. It's
Okay.
more like he doesn't want to compromise with the drivers. He's like, I've given you the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
It's yours to win the race. And there's no like not winning the race. You have to win the race type
Yeah.
of thing. And he's like, I don't want anybody on my team who doesn't have that mindset. That like you'll literally drive yourself off the side of the road before you give up type of mindset. And so it's about like being driven and being passionate and how those things can equal to great things, but they can
Mhm.
also get you in very sticky personal situations where you have mistresses who have children and then your real life one dies. It's an odd movie because it's definitely about racing, about this very famous person, but about that very specific point in his life
Yes.
where these things are happening concurrently, both professionally and personally. And I thought the acting was really well done and the cinematography was kind of amazing. There's 2 shots in this movie where a car crashes and it definitely looks CG. And that kind of bothered me because the rest of it, I couldn't tell what was CG
Really?
and what
Okay.
wasn't. Like all the old cars on the countryside racing and stuff like that, it all looked like so amazingly good until they get into an accident. And then, like they can't literally do that. And so it clearly cut to CG during those accidents. And that bothered me. But the rest of it is very filled with pathos and like, dripping with, I don't know, importance,
Mhm.
even if that's false. But that's kind of, I think that's just Michael Mann's style, right? He makes you feel like you're watching this epic story, even though you're kind of just watching a small story. Really.
No, yeah, Michael Mann
Ultimately.
makes anything look important
Right.
just through his filmmaking style. Yeah.
Yep. And he does that here. And I think it worked. And it's really weird seeing Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz opposite each other as man and wife and feeling like Adam Driver is so much older than Penelope Cruz.
Even though he's got to be like 20
He's
years younger
20
than
years
her.
younger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the makeup job they gave him and like how he holds himself, he feels like 55 to 65-year-old man, which is how
Really?
old Enzo was
Yeah.
at that time. So,
Yeah.
and he's married like a younger woman
Who's
And
Penelope
so-
Cruz?
who's played by Penelope Cruz. Yeah. It was wild because in the back of my mind, I knew in real life, Penelope Cruz is older. The only complaint I have with the movie is Shailene Woodley plays the other woman.
Okay.
And like when I see Shailene Woodley, I do not think Italian.
Yeah, I guess. Does she have an accent? Or is she just using her normal voice?
Everybody has an accent, but
Okay.
not like a great accent.
Okay.
Not like I don't know. I don't know Italian accents that like the only Italian accents I know are like Mario and Luigi,
Yeah, which is
like super
really
inflated.
bad. Yeah.
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 Like stereotypical.
Mhm.
And so maybe they had like less stereotypical accents. Actually, I don't think Adam Driver had an accent. I didn't even notice it, which is probably good for the movie. But I
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
notice it. So
He never says it's a
Um,
me, Enzo, or anything like that.
no.
Okay.
It was just hard anytime Shailene Woodley came on screen, and I was kind of like, I'm supposed to accept her as like the Italian mistress. I don't
Mhm.
know. It was
Yeah.
weird.
I was thinking back to the car crashes you mentioned. Did you see the
Mhm.
clip where Adam Driver was in he was in some sort of panel or interview, and someone asked him like, "Oh, how do you respond to the criticism of the CG crashes or something like that?" Like this
Oh,
person
really?
kind of makes a comment of like, Like, this movie looks kind of bad. How do you respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
And then Ab Driver just like takes a beat. It just says, F you. That's how I respond. Next question. But doesn't say F you. He says the entire.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, he wouldn't like me then, because I also have that criticism for sure.
Right. But that probably would be like the first thing you say to him when you meet him.
No, I wouldn't mention. Why would I ask him that anyway? He's an actor in the movie.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it would not be the first thing.
Well, I do want to catch that one. I fear that since it got no Oscar nominations, it's going to kind of get pushed down on my list, and it'll be a forgotten 2023 movie for me. But it's Michael Mann, it's Adam Driver. Nothing in there I don't want to see.
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it.
All right, my number 3 is a rare documentary that I watched.
Okay.
This actually, I believe, was a listener recommendation. So someone sent us in a top 10 last 10 sometime in the last 6 months. And on their top 10 last 10 was a movie called Into the Deep: The Submarine Murder Case.
Okay.
And I was just intrigued by that title. I had no idea what this movie was about, but just the title itself, I'm like, well, I want to see that movie. That sounds fascinating. And this is a doc. And I guess you can call it a true
crime.
True crime. Thank you. Also, true murder. It's a true crime doc, but it didn't start as a true crime doc. It started as a filmmaker was documenting an amateur inventor named Peter Madsen, who was, I think, Dutch or Scandinavian. And he was kind of this eccentric guy who ran this maker space. He would have like interns and volunteers come help with his inventions. He was trying to launch a non-government funded man-made rocket into space. That was his big accomplishment. He had built this personal submarine, and he's had a bit of a cult of personality where people would just come to his warehouse, to his workshop, to like be around this eccentric guy, to use his tools, to work with him to achieve these goals. And one day he takes a reporter, a female reporter, for like a cruise on his private submarine through the bay. And they're supposed to she's going to interview him. And then they kind of disappear for a period of time. And then he comes back by himself. And everyone's wondering, where's this reporter? And first he says, oh, well, I dropped her off, at this pier over here. And then her family's like, well, she never came home. And there's no video of that. What happened? He's like, oh, well, there was an accident. And then they find her body in the bay, and the things keep kind of just growing from there. So you could easily read the Wikipedia about what happened, because I guess this was a rather well-known case about this, disappearance of this reporter. But what makes this movie really interesting is this filmmaker is recording all these people within this guy's orbit in real time as they keep learning more and more about this case and about this crime. So, first they're like, oh, he's disappearing. Everyone's really worried about it. And then he appears, but she doesn't appear. And they're like, oh, well, he said he dropped off. He must have dropped her off. And then they find a body and they're all like, okay. And you're watching these people try to reconcile the person they know and respect and love with the person that he turns out to be. And it's kind of fascinating to you're kind of watching people going through the grieving process, if that's the best way to put it. But it's just so fascinating to see them like take these logic circles to try and be on his side. And as the evidence gets more damning and damning and damning, they're more like, oh, I don't think we can follow this guy anymore. So I mean, I don't know if I'm like, again, it's a true crime thing, so you can't really spoil anything because you can just look it all up. But just watching the people in his orbit sort of come to terms with everything that's happening, I thought was a very fascinating part of this whole movie.
Nice. That's on Netflix?
Yeah, it was. I don't know where it is now. It's still on Netflix. Yep, it's still on Netflix. So,
okay,
check it out.
I will do. Sounds interesting. My number 3 is from 2022. The movie is titled Pinball: The Man Who Saved the Game.
This is also a documentary?
No, not documentary, but has documentary elements, I would say. No, doesn't have documentary. So this is kind of like Tetris or Flamin' Hot Cheetos, or what was the other one that we watched?
Blackberry.
Yeah, right. But Blackberry was good. This is more on the Blackberry side.
Okay.
Of like these types of movies. So did you know, you probably did, but did you know that pinball at one point was illegal across most of the United States?
Yeah, until like the 70s or something.
Right. So specifically in New York and Chicago, it was totally illegal. They considered it gambling.
Mm-hmm.
This was like in the 50s, I believe, or 40s. It went from kind of an amusement thing to like, a couple of politicians decided it was a good campaign, thing to rally around to ban amusement games because they were gambling, and pinball got swept up into that. And so for like 20 plus years, they were illegal and destroyed essentially. And you could have them at your establishment, but you couldn't charge for them. So why would you even have it?
Okay. Yeah.
Type of thing. So the moment you charged for it, you were in trouble, which meant that it got pushed underground to like the seedier parts of big cities. So like adult bookstores, you'd find pinball games in. Like underground bars, you'd find pinball games in, but you wouldn't find them at Pizza Huts.
Yeah,
for sure. So in the 70s, this guy named Roger Sharp, he remembers playing a bunch of pinball as a youth and enjoying it, and then he is wondering what happened to them, and he figures out that they're illegal, and he's kind of bummed about that, and he has like self-confidence issues, and he finds a pinball machine and plays it and finds that he's pretty good at it, and it actually like helps him in life. He becomes obsessed with beating this pinball game and getting good at it. Mm-hmm. Over the course of getting good at it, he realized that one could get good at pinball, which means it's not gambling, it's skill.
Yeah.
Like there's an element of chance to it, but also if you're good at it, you can stack the numbers in your favor so that you can have a long game and you can actually, anyway, not gambling. So he sets out to get, at first he just wants his own pinball game for his house. And so he is a writer who's looking for work, and he gets a job at GQ before GQ was like the men's magazine that we knew it to be today. And he starts writing about pinball for GQ. And then that draws the attention of like the American Amusement Association or something like that, who are like trying to get pinball, off the ban list. And then they go testify in front of like a New York commission, something or other, some kind of government entity, to try to get them to overturn the ban. So that's a lot of history. That's what happened. You can read all about it. The reason why you should watch the movie is because the way they've told the movie is they've wrapped it in kind of a love story, essentially, about a guy who meets a woman who has a son. And he's kind of like very hesitant to kind of get too involved with her because of this son. He like doesn't want the responsibility of a stepson, basically. But he also really likes this woman. He likes the son too. Over the course of the movie, he, gives in on that. But there's just a lot going on in the movie, and it's the perfect tone of like history lesson and lightness and for some reason in my brain, I kept comparing it to like a wholesome version of Howard Stern's Private Parts.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Private Parts?
I have seen. I mean, when it came out, it's been a long time, but yeah, I've seen Private
Like
Parts.
the tone of Private Parts for some reason, kind of the wacky. You're following this guy through like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And there's just like a certain level of like separated from reality, wacky, fast paced, telling a lot of story, a lot of like narrating to the camera, a lot of like voiceover, like, oh, that didn't work. And now I'm going to try this type of thing. And you're like cutting in and out. Just the style of telling the story was super well done. And the lead was a guy I had never seen before. It was real skinny actor who just charmed me. I was like, man, this guy's great. He's probably only great for this. Like he has a look that like does not scream leading man at all. And that's probably why it worked for him in this movie.
Ouch.
I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
he's a very normal looking, lanky, tall guy.
Is that Mike Faced,
Probably.
who plays Roger?
Could be.
Okay.
I'd have to see a photo. Yeah, it was just really well done in that way. And I didn't expect much from it and got way more than I bargained for. I think if you're up for like a feel good movie where you can cheer on everybody over the course of it, you should definitely check out Pinball: The Man That Saved the Game.
Let's see. He was in West Side Story and he's in the upcoming Challengers.
Okay.
And it looks like he's from Broadway. I wonder if he's playing a major part in Challengers.
I don't think this is the guy. Nope. Mike Faced.
That's him.
That's
Yeah,
him.
he's second build in Challengers.
He looks so different on Google.
Okay. Yeah, and he's in Bike Riders, the new Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, Jodie Comer movie.
Okay.
He's fifth build in that.
I'm into that. He looks less lanky, awkward
Okay.
in like in Google Photos. Like
Yeah.
look up this and just add Pinball.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
they did a good job of like, see that mustache?
Yeah.
That's what he looks like in the movie. He just looks like a 70s dude. They did a good job with his makeup for sure.
Yeah, I mean, right. I would say he still has a rather unremarkable face, but
Especially when you hide it behind that hair and that mustache
Yes.
and the glasses and everything.
but he's not. He's not like an ugly guy or anything.
No, I wouldn't say ugly. They just weren't focusing on the guy that's in those Google photos. You know what I
Right.
mean? At the red carpet events, he looks like a stud.
Well, looks like you'll be seeing a lot more of the face to face this year.
Sure.
That was a pun, James. You should ha 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 for that. No. Okay.
Nope.
No. There we go. That was one of yours you wanted to use more often this year.
You just didn't hear the first one.
You asked me to be more funny, and I'm trying my best. And puns are all I got.
Sure.
It's puns or humor you got to bleep. So it's your choice. All right. My number 2 is a movie that turns 50 years old this year. Netflix is actually curating movies that are having anniversaries for that year. So like right now, Netflix is showing a bunch of movies that came out on the 4s. So like 2014, 94, 2004, etc.
Really?
Yeah, which I kind of like, I know Netflix's ultimate mission is to make money and keep subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
But if their plan on doing that is to like curate older movies that are experiencing anniversaries, I'm kind of okay with that. Like
Sure.
it's better than them just like pumping out some junk once a week. So
Like, how do you even know they're doing that?
so I read, here's the problem with Netflix is they do a really bad job of advertising what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember reading an article about like Netflix has this new plan where they're going to start like having featured movies that are that have anniversaries for that year. And, this being 2024, they're doing things from 74, 84, 64, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this movie on Netflix. It's been on my watch list for a while, and I got a little notification that popped up. It is 1974's The Parallax View. Which I think
I like this movie.
Yeah, you did this. Yeah, I remember you talking about this one too. So this is a 70s paranoid thriller starring Warren Beatty, who plays an investigative journalist who is looking into the assassination of a senator who was a rising political candidate. And like most paranoid thrillers, the more he looks into it, the more he sees this connective spider web of other things and other events that all seem to point to this one event, and people who were witnesses and involved in on the day of the assassination, or ending up mysteriously dead also.
Mm-hmm.
So like any good thriller, he's kind of going deeper and deeper to find out what's actually happening. He doesn't believe the official story. There must be something more going on here. And I like a paranoid thriller. I think it's a fun genre. Obviously in the 70s with Watergate and everything going on, there was a deep sense of paranoia and not trusting your government, which I think is reflected through movies, which is great. What makes this movie, I think, stand out is the direction. It's directed by Alan Pakula, who's not a director I'm familiar with, but he just kind of makes these surreal choices throughout the movie that really stood out. Oh, he directed All the President's Men, Sophie's Choice. I should be more familiar with this guy, The Pelican Brief. Okay, so little known director Alan Pakula. No famous movies at all besides The Parallax View.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so like this movie's probably most famous for there being a fist fight on top of the Space Needle, which looks pretty cool. But like what stood out to me were these other moments. Like there's this, you probably remember towards the end, there's this empty convention center where they're setting up for a speech. And it starts with like just a marching band marching through this empty convention center with all these empty chairs. And at this point, you're kind of deep into the movie, so you really don't know what's going on. And I like that he kind of just dropped you in here. You're like, what is this marching band doing? Like, is this part of the conspiracy? What are we doing right now? But it was super fun to watch that. Or do you remember the, I guess the indoctrination tape that Warren Beatty watches as he goes somewhere and is like shown a tape? And I've seen lots of different, indoctrination and brainwashing tapes and movies before, but this is the first time where like this movie gave you 5 minutes of the tape. And that's all you're seeing. Like it never cuts to his face. It never cuts away. It's just the screen becomes this indoctrination tape of these repeated words, repeated images. And it was just so fascinating of a choice to like show you the entire thing. So yeah, it's a movie where I'm going to remember less the actual plot and more of like these key scenes throughout it because the presentation was just so unique.
Yeah, the final convention scene, I think it was like super interesting.
Yes, with like the golf cart that like crashes into the tables. Remember all that? Yeah.
And like the super long shot that they have in it.
Yep.
Long shot meaning shot from way behind, and then all the scaffolding chasing.
Yes,
that goes on. Yeah, it was good. I like that movie a lot. I need to rewatch it. I've only seen it the once, but all right. My number 2 is American Fiction.
Oh yeah,
2023. This one I watched before we did our top 20. Didn't quite make my top 20 list, but I did enjoy it. That's why it's at my number 2. It's easily a 4-star movie, so it could have made my top 20 as far as by the numbers for sure. This is the movie starring Jeffrey Wright, where he's like a serious author, also a professor at a college, and his books don't really sell very well. He writes about what he wants to write about, essentially. What he sees other African-American writers around him that have had success, what they seem to write are like crime stories or stories where like Black people are involved in some kind of generational trauma, or you know what I mean? Those types of stories seem to be the ones that are selling when you're an author. And he doesn't write those stories because he doesn't feel like he doesn't live in that world, nor does he think most Black people live in that world. In his opinion, he thinks that's like a stereotype. And by writing those types of stories, you're propping up those stereotypes. So he's an intellectual, I would say, who has thought about this a lot and has strong feelings about it. And then at some point he needs some money. And as a joke, he writes one of these stories. He almost writes a parody of one of these stories as a joke, and then gives it to his publisher as a joke. And then his publisher actually shows it to people, and then he sells it.
Oh.
And then he doesn't want his name on it. So they make up a name, and then it starts getting even bigger, like pre-release. And then they want him to do press for the book that's about to come out. And so he does a bunch of press under the assumed name, like not in person, basically over the phone and stuff like that. So now he has to pretend like he's an ex-convict, because that's the backstory that they gave the fake author. That's how he knew how to write this type of story, is because he was an ex-convict type of thing. So not only has he written this book with all these what he considers cliches in them, but he also has to like play a guy, even though he's not an actor, he's just a writer. But now he's put himself in this position where he has to pretend like he used to be in prison and stuff like that. And so the movie is kind of a commentary. It's a comedic commentary on the idea of like racial identity, or like whether you feel like you're represented even by the media that supposedly represents your culture. And it's a little bit of an indictment, satirical indictment on like the types of stories that white people like to hear when it comes to minorities, or what we're attracted to, versus like the types of stories that probably some of them would prefer to tell. And so, and even broader than those kinds of racial things, it's kind of an indictment on like the cyclical nature of telling stories. Like you tell 10 stories, and like whichever one makes the most money, you tell that story over and over and over and over and over and over again. And even though those other 9 stories, they might just been like told the wrong way, doesn't mean they're not good. They just weren't the one that made the most. And so they kind of just fall away by the wayside, and you end up having the same story told over and over and over again. And even worse is when it's told by a smaller financial base, like the target audience is smaller, less opportunity financially, and you really get like a zoned in story. And so anyway, it's definitely like a movie for old people, I would say. By old people, I mean like your NPR listener.
I'm an NPR listener. Does that make me an old person?
You're kind of old.
I would say I'm
Kyle, you're 40. You're
early
getting
middle
there.
age.
Sure. You're getting there though.
Yeah, I know.
You're getting to that age where you need to watch these feel good type movies. You need to go on a Sunday afternoon with your other fellow retirees.
I'm not a retiree. I'm not even close to retirement.
Just watch a feel good indictment of white media supremacy.
That makes me feel like I'm one of the good guys, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can sit in a dark theater with your other liberal woke audience members and watch this movie.
Only if they seem to subconsciously hate the theater experience as much as I do, apparently.
Sure. What I found interesting is the movie has a lot to say about these types of things, right? About like the fact that like the most popular movies about that star are written and directed by Black people are like crime stories
Yeah.
set in LA type of thing. Meanwhile, the only ones that like old people will go watch on a Sunday afternoon are like gentle indictments of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle are like the Moonlights of the world and stuff like that. Like it's not the only thing that's ever made, certainly. Although Moonlight is essentially a drug movie about a drug dealer anyway.
Yeah. Or yeah, and the kid in his orbit. Yep.
Right. Anyway, Jeffrey Wright is getting a lot of steam for his performance in the movie. I thought he was good in it for sure. I wasn't too surprised by his performance. I always thought he's good in most things.
Yeah, I like him.
And so I think you're going to get more of the same if you know him already. And overall, I enjoyed it. And I think it's a movie that's meant to be an enjoyable watch that has something to say. It just says it in like the nicest way possible, I would say. Which is probably why people like it. My number 2.
I do want to check it out. Jeffrey Wright's up. He got an Oscar nomination, correct?
I don't know. I know he got nominated at other events. But
Okay. I thought he had a leading actor knob for this one. But
5 nominations: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. That's all they say, but that's only 3 of them. So I don't know what the other 2 are.
Screenplay, possibly.
Probably. I don't know why they don't list all of them. That's
Costume.
annoying.
Who knows? Well, James, you inadvertently did a great job of setting up my number 1, because my number 1 is about Black generational trauma in LA. And this is 2015's Straight Outta Compton.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a movie that I have always wanted to see because I like NWA. I was obviously not listening to them when they came out. I was 5 years old, was not listening to hardcore gangster rap. But, you know, in high school and like in the 90s, I was getting more, as my music horizons were broadening, I was getting more into hip hop. I was like, oh, let's work backwards. So I eventually discovered NWA and kind of the roots of what we can call the gangster rap genre, if you want to call it. So I've always liked their music and what they had to say, as well as a lot of the artists that spun out of it and the history behind it. So when this movie came out, I was excited for it. And then I think the runtime turned me off because it is 2.5 hours long. And it's hard for me to find 2.5 hours to watch a movie if it's not in the middle of the day, which I get very little time for because, you know, family and everything. It's, you know, if I start a movie, it's 10 o'clock at night by the time I start it by myself. And, you know,
you'd like it to be over by midnight.
Us old people start to fall asleep early. As you know. So.
Sure.
So anyway, for whatever reason, the stars aligned. I had a couple hours on hand that was not around my bedtime. I'm like, you know, I'm going to watch Straight Outta Compton. And I liked this movie.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it, you know, it's a biopic. It kind of gives you the history of NWA. You see all these different players. You've got, you know, like Ice Cube and Dr. Dre and Eazy-E. They're kind of the main players. MC Ren and Yella are given a little less screen time, which I think their real life counterpoints are probably a little not happy about. And like people like Arabian Prince are just left out of the movie completely. But we can talk a little bit more about why there's certain focuses in some places, not others. But yeah, I thought it was really well performed, really well acted to see this group form. I was not expecting Paul Giamatti to be in this movie. And, you know, he plays sort of their manager who you're not quite sure whose interests he has in mind. And that was definitely a part of the story I was not familiar with. And then it kind of dives into sort of the conflict, which I was a little familiar with, of NWA and how they sort of broke up and all the interpersonal things going on. This is definitely a approved biopic and approved mostly by Dr. Dre and Ice-T, because I think they're probably handled the easiest of everyone. Ice-T is definitely Ice Cube. I'm sorry.
okay.
As a gangster rap fan, I feel very embarrassed to confuse the two.
No, it's fine.
That's fine. It's fine. Ice Cube probably comes off the best in this movie as sort of like this songwriting genius who goes off to do his own thing because he doesn't get the due he wants and is being blasted by the band and gets great success. Dr. Dre comes off pretty well too. Like all the D Barnes stuff is just not in this movie whatsoever. This movie, he's like this family man trying to fight for his son and everything. Eazy-E, who passed away 30 years ago. I think probably time has healed a lot of wounds. So even though he's sort of the antagonist throughout a good chunk of this movie, he kind of comes off good in the end. Definitely Jerry Heller, played by Paul Giamatti. He's sort of the bad guy of this movie. So it's definitely a movie where it's written by the victors in that sense. And I'm sure you could tell an unauthorized version much differently and focus on different parts of it. But I thought, as a biopic, it all came together very well, was enjoyable to watch. There was some fun cameos, like Lakeith Stanfield pops in as Snoop Dogg for like just a scene. And he's almost doing like an SNL impersonation of Snoop Dogg, but it kind of works. It's sort of fun.
It's so short too that it's not long enough for you to be like annoyed by it.
Exactly. He's got the one scene. Obviously everyone hates Suge Knight because he's just shown as like this psychopath, which he most likely is in real life. So yeah. Then this movie also got me down the rabbit hole conspiracy theory, which I don't believe, but that Suge Knight gave Eazy-E HIV.
Sure.
Which is ridiculous, but I was like, oh, I did not even know that was a conspiracy theory. Who knew? And it seems to be that Suge Knight likes to have that reputation, so he feeds the theory. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, a movie that I avoided for silly reasons and totally worth catching up on, and my number one.
Yeah, I remember enjoying that movie when it came out. I don't remember where it landed in my top 20 that year, but I'm pretty sure it made it.
Oh, yeah. If I was to do a top 20 of whatever, 2016, this would probably be on it.
Yeah.
2015.
I'm curious now. What did I... You think it came out in 2016?
It came out in 2015, which is the year my son was born. So, it was just hard for me to catch some movies in that time. Especially if they were, he was a fall baby. So, like, the whole Oscar season, that whole push, I missed so many of those movies in that era from that time.
Sure. So really, this would be like in 2017.
No, it came out in 2015.
Well, then it wasn't in my top 20.
Interesting.
Weird. Oh, it's number one in the honorable mentions.
So just barely made it.
I mean, I had to save that 20th slot for Chappie.
Yeah, so which movie do you think about more now, Chappie or Straight Outta Compton?
Oh, I think about Chappie every day.
Every day. You just love the Ant-word, apparently.
Chappie's amazing. I love Chappie. I need to rewatch that movie.
I do want to see Chappie just because is it Neil Blomkamp?
You've never seen it?
I've never seen Chappie. What?
Oh,
again,
I think you'd love Chappie.
2015 is a bit of a drop in my movie watching habits just because my son was born that year, so it just was hard to So there's movies that like I've seen all the key ones mostly, but like those middle ones, which I maybe would have watched, just didn't get a time to at the time.
Yeah, make some time for Chappie for sure. All right, my favorite movie of the last 10 I watched is from 1988. And it's a comedy called Married to the Mob, which I had never seen before.
Okay.
It's a Jonathan Demme movie. Jonathan Demme, this dude has an interesting career. I mean, it's the guy that directed Silence of the Lambs.
I thought, yeah.
He directed this movie as well, straight comedy. He directed Philadelphia, the AIDS drama with Tom Hanks and
Denzel
Washington. He directed the Manchurian Candidate remake with another Denzel Washington movie.
Is
Meryl
that
Streep.
So? The original Manchurian Candidate is a top 100 movie for me.
Sure.
I'm sure the new Manchurian Candidate is fine. But being that I love the original as a top 100, is it worth for me to see the 2000 version? Or am I just going to, wrinkle my face at it for not being my top 100 movie version?
No, I think I think it would be worth it just to see the story told, a little differently.
Okay.
I don't think it'll supplant the original for you, but it's got a bunch of people you like in it too.
Yeah.
I mean, Denzel, Meryl Streep, Liev Schreiber, Jon Voight, Jeffrey Wright. Yeah. I think it's worth a poke, even though I don't think it'll, replace the original for you. But not a bad movie for sure. He also directed Rachel Getting Married, which is a very different movie. Like, he's just kind of all over the place. He directed
that movie?
Yeah.
Really? Right. I would assume that was some small indie director.
No.
That was Jonathan Demme.
Jonathan Demme. Anyway, Married to the Mob, straight comedy starring Michelle Pfeiffer, Matthew Modine, Alec Baldwin, a couple other people. And the main character is definitely Michelle Pfeiffer. She plays kind of like a mobster's wife, who that mobster dies pretty early in the movie. Her husband dies, and she doesn't really like being a mob wife. Like, she doesn't like being in the dark all the time and knowing that these guys are all messing around and stuff like that. And so when her husband dies, she decides that she wants to get out. Basically, she doesn't want to be a part of this group anymore. And so meanwhile, the boss takes a shine to her and is like, even though she's a recent widow, he wants to get her as a side fling, I would say. And so she's not interested, but also he's the boss, so you can't make him very angry, basically. And so she moves away, but not to the other side of the city, and tries to start living her own life. Meanwhile, she's under observation by the FBI. Everybody's under observation by the FBI. So you get this side story of these FBI characters who are investigating her and all the people that orbit around her. And it's kind of a comedy of errors with a little bit of a love story built into it.
Okay.
And I just found it to be super funny and charming and interesting. And I'm not sure I'd ever seen Michelle Pfeiffer in that role of charming. I've certainly seen movies from the 90s that Michelle Pfeiffer was in where charming wasn't the first word that would come out of your mouth when describing Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Hot, attractive, you know what I mean? Other probably reductive things
or also
said about her.
She was often the unattainable woman too.
Right. She was often in erotic thrillers and stuff like that. And she was always the dangerous lady in those movies. Her and Sharon Stone seem to be in a lot of those types of things.
Well, I would say.
In that time period. And in this one, she's kind of playing the girl next door type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the one who doesn't want to live that life. And so she's trying to do better for herself. Meanwhile, these very caricatured version of gangsters are revolving around her, trying to take advantage of her, and she's doing her best to survive in this new existence. And I just thought it was super well acted and fun to watch, and fun to see a bunch of people that I remember seeing throughout the 90s.
Yeah.
Playing roles that just I don't associate with them at all. Even Alec Baldwin, I just don't associate him with being a comedic Italian gangster. And that's what he is in this movie. It also has this element of wackiness to it. When the movie first opens up, Matthew Modine, who's one of the FBI agents, wakes up. He's sleeping in a bunk bed, and he has this Pee-wee's Playhouse style contraption that helps him get dressed really fast in the morning.
Like an auto dresser of some sort?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
that he's like devised with like clothespins and like strategically put it so that he can just kind of like roll out of bed and like his shirt gets put on for him and then he drops himself into his pants, which are being like held up with clothespins and open so that he can just drop his legs into them. And it was so unnecessary and like silly, but that kind of defined the whole movie for me. I was ready for it to be kind of more of like a mob movie than a comedy. And that clearly defined like, oh, this is going to be goofy. And it was. And I enjoyed it for that. And this is another one of those that were on the video store shelves that
you just remembered as a kid, like seeing out there.
I don't remember ever wanting to see it.
Okay.
Because it was like for adults. I was like 8. But I remember seeing it on the store shelves and then just never got to it until now. And I'm glad I did because it was pretty great.
I hate to go on nostalgia road here. I'm not going to do it. Never mind.
Okay.
Okay. It's like sometimes I wish I could walk through a video store again and like see those covers and be like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that 35 years ago when I was a kid. Like, like I'm sure there's those distinct ones which I've forgotten, but if I was to see them again, it would just come back to me as like, oh yeah, that VHS cover right there.
This is one of those that like I don't think I ever would have seen.
Yeah.
Except I was flipping through a streaming service and there it was. And I was like, I remember this movie. Why haven't I seen this before?
Yeah,
and then it was like Michelle Pfeiffer and Alec Baldwin. And I was like, all right. I mean, I don't know anybody that likes this movie, but I do remember it like existing.
Right.
And so I watched it. And then after I watched it, I looked it up and like Michelle Pfeiffer and somebody else got like an Academy Award nomination for this.
Really?
Which is odd for a comedy.
Yeah. Huh.
Michelle Pfeiffer and Dean Stockwell both got Best Supporting Actor Award nominations, not wins, nominations for this. The other thing that was cool about it was when the movie ends, they just start playing 80s music, but it's like a medley of 80s music where they only play like a minute of each song. And the music had like nothing to do with the movie. I got the feeling it was just music that Jonathan Demme liked.
Oh, just like things he wanted to put in there.
Right. And they were playing it over shots that didn't make the movie. So like sometimes they were alternate angles or like extensions of scenes.
Okay.
From the movie. It was like the movie told in real time from alternate angles.
Interesting.
And they would have the actors mouthing words, but like they were playing the 80s music over it so that you couldn't hear the dialogue.
You could actually hear what they were saying. Interesting.
But it was clearly like alternative takes from other angles or like extensions of scenes that they probably cut for time. And so there's like this 5-minute weird montage of like 80s music at the end that ends with two actors dancing on the steps of like a city hall, which is not in the movie at all.
Huh. Like, okay.
Right. And it was just kind of like, I have never seen a movie that does this during the credits sequence. Like to this day, I've never seen a movie that did that for no reason whatsoever. And this one does. So anyway, I liked it. My number one.
All right. Nice.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode 619 of the Cinereelists. We appreciate your listenership. Hopefully you heard about a movie or two that you had never heard of or maybe hadn't considered seeing. Maybe you will now. If you had one recommendation, any movie on your entire list, you don't even get to know who you're recommending it to. It's just a general recommendation. What should they be watching, Kyle?
I think Parallax View.
That's a good one.
That would probably be my number one recommendation.
I think most people could like Parallax View.
I think so. Yeah.
For sure. Mine would probably be Pinball. I think most people could like Pinball. Absolutely. Married to the Mob's pretty good too. But
I mean, I would watch Married to the Mob. That sounds like fun to me.
Absolutely.
We Megan watched part of Parallax View with me, and she was like, "Who's that actor?" I'm like, "Oh, that's Warren Beatty." And she was like, "I thought he was like a heartthrob or something." Like, "Oh yeah, he was definitely a heartthrob of the era." And she's like, really? And then he like turned his head to some angle. She's like, oh, I see it now. So like, it was just funny. At first she was like, I'm not sure. He's like, oh wait, no, there it is.
Sure. Well, what makes you a heartthrob kind of changed over the years.
For sure. I mean, yeah, he was a heartthrob of like the 60s and 70s. I mean, I would say 60s into 90s. He had a good 30-year run.
Absolutely.
As a heartthrob. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
If only we can all have a 30-year run as a heartthrob. I think my heartthrob years are over, unfortunately.
My run was pretty short.
Yep. Okay.
For sure.
My run got me a pretty wife, a very smart wife. So I'm like, all right, it worked out.
There you go. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can always find us on YouTube. Check us out there. Search Cinereelists on YouTube. Find us and subscribe. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Leave an Apple Podcast review or send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. You could also follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Cinereelists. Or you can follow me on my personal Twitter or Letterboxd account at YoJRB.
You can find me on Letterboxd at PeterSKB.
Potentially next week, we will be doing Zone of Interest, the new Jonathan Glazer film. Mm-hmm. We might pivot to something else, but probably we'll be doing Zone of Interest. So if you haven't caught that movie yet, you probably should, especially if you plan on being invested in the Oscars. Because I know it got a bunch of Oscar nominations.
It did. Yep.
How many did it get? 5 or 6?
5 or 6. I don't think it got any major acting awards.
Right.
I could be wrong, though. I haven't studied the Oscar list quite in depth yet, so I'm not as up to it as I should be.
Having seen Zone of Interest, which I have not seen it, have you heard about the way that they shot that movie? Like the interesting way that they shot it?
Yeah, I read that they had multiple cameras set up at different depths. And
some hidden, some not.
Oh, there's some hidden. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds like there's minimal crew and they just like would have the actors act out the scene. And the actors had no idea like which camera was shooting what and what was the close up, what was the medium shots, whatever. So,
and I've heard sometimes they didn't even know what they were shooting. Like they would just be like action and then like 20 minutes would pass and then they would get some stage direction.
Really? This is why Jonathan Glazer makes one movie a decade.
Right.
So, right.
And then like they would kind of work that stage direction into what they were naturally doing for the last 20 minutes.
Right.
Type of thing. And then they'd be done with whatever that stage direction was and nobody would call cut. And so they'd do a 20 minutes on the tail of just existing, basically. Yeah. Which is wild to me.
So
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking forward to talking with you next week because it's definitely a unique movie.
Cool. I'm into it. All right, people. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep it Cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.